My parents told me to stay quiet, that the truth would destroy us, and they were right. But silence nearly killed me. I found what they were hiding when I was 8. Now, I'm exposing it all, no matter who it burns. The morning after, Jake gave his full statement to the state detectives. I woke up with a strange sense of stillness in my apartment. Not peace, not closure, just a heavy pause, like the air itself was waiting to see what came next. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at nothing, wondering how many more layers there were to peel back before this horror stopped surprising me. Jake's testimony had confirmed what I feared, that my uncle wasn't bluffing about his history, and worse, that his lie about a larger network might have been a smokescreen for something even more insidious, his attempt to delay justice. But it also proved something else. I wasn't the only one. And I wasn't the only one who saw, but stayed silent. Jake had carried his own shame, his own version of my burden. And now that we had spoken, that weight had shifted between us, no longer just mine to hold. That day, I got a call from Jacqueline Wilson, the prosecutor who had become something between a legal advocate and a lifeline. Her voice was unusually tight. "We've had a development," she said, without any preamble. One of the cold case units from a nearby county called. They matched one of the journals from the second cabin to a missing girl from 1996. A girl whose case went cold over 2 decades ago. The details in the journal are explicit, but it's enough to reopen the case. My heart sank. Another name, another child, another family about to receive the kind of truth that doesn't heal, just confirms the worst. And there's more, she added. The forensic techs finished decrypting a second hard drive. It's not just journals, it's footage, some of it recent. Very recent. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep myself from collapsing. Do you think any of it? I couldn't even finish the sentence. She cut in softly. No, you're not in the videos, but there are other girls, and we're trying to identify them now. Some may still be alive, some may not. The thought that someone, right now, could be living through what I survived, or worse, made me feel like I couldn't breathe. My vision blurred. I had to sit down. This wasn't just about closure anymore. This wasn't just about justice. It was about preventing more trauma before it ever started. Later that evening, I called Jake. I hadn't planned to. But something about knowing there were others out there. Others who hadn't been found, whose names didn't even make it into headlines, made me need to hear a voice that understood. He picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "Not really." "Same. We didn't say much more. We didn't need to." That kind of grief, the one born from witnessing evil up close and realizing it's far deeper than you thought, doesn't ask for words. It just needs a place to exist without collapsing. That weekend, Jacqueline invited me to meet with the victim support coordinator from the DA's office. The idea was to prepare for the next phase, the actual trial. It would be long, brutal, televised. She wanted me to know my rights, my protections, my choices. But what stuck with me most wasn't the paperwork or the logistics. It was something she said offhandedly. As we were walking out of the building together, "You were the first domino," she said, pausing on the courthouse steps, the one that didn't fall quietly, the one that made the others start to shake. I didn't know how to feel about that. I still don't, because sometimes I want to be proud, and other times I just want it all to disappear. Every headline, every memory, every dark room, and hidden drawers. But I know now that pretending it never happened is what allowed it to go on for so long. And so, even when it's unbearable, I keep showing up. For every girl in those photos, for Jake, for the child I used to be, for the silence that almost swallowed us. Because if someone doesn't stand up, it just keeps happening. And I'm done being quiet. The call came in the middle of the night. Not from the police, not from the DA, but from my mother. I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether I should answer. My thumb hovered over the red button, then the green. I didn't want to hear her voice. I didn't want to hear excuses soaked in tears, but more than anything, I didn't want to hear her lie to me one more time. Still, I answered. Her voice cracked before she even got through the first sentence. "I didn't know how bad it was," she whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't." There was a long silence on my end. I let her sit in it. "Finally," I asked, "then what did you know, Mom?" She inhaled sharply, like she hadn't expected the question, or maybe she just hadn't expected me to ask it so directly. I knew Mark had issues, she said. He always made people uncomfortable, even as a kid. And your dad? He changed after you were born. Got colder, quiet. I thought it was stress. No, I said flatly. You chose not to see it. She started crying. Not the theatrical sobs I'd heard as a child when she wanted sympathy, but the quiet, restrained kind. The kind people cry when they realize the floor has dropped out from under them and there's no one left to catch them. I told you, I said, my voice low. I told you what I saw in that room. I sat at the edge of your bed, shaking, and you told me I was being dramatic. You looked me in the eyes and told me to never speak of it again. Do you even understand what that did to me? I thought you were imagining it, she said. You were always a creative kid. You read too much. I thought maybe it was a dream. I laughed, bitter and sharp. You thought the hidden room full of surveillance footage and binders with my name on them was a dream. There was another long pause. No, she admitted. I knew it wasn't. I just didn't want to believe it was real. And once I realized it probably was, I couldn't bring myself to do anything, because if I did, your father would have gone to prison. Our family would have been torn apart. Mom, I said slowly, our family was already torn apart. You just wanted it to look pretty from the outside. The line went quiet again, and for a moment, I thought she'd hung up. But then, she said something I didn't expect. Something that made my stomach knot in ways I hadn't felt since that day in my father's study. I found a binder, too. I froze. What? After your father was arrested, I searched the house. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe proof that he was innocent, that this was all some mistake. But in the attic, behind an old filing cabinet, there was one binder. It had a girl's name I didn't recognize, but the layout, it was just like the one you described. Photos, notes. I didn't know what to do with it. Why didn't you turn it in? Because I was afraid, she said. Afraid they'd think I knew all along, that I was part of it. You were part of it, I said, voice trembling. Maybe not the abuse, maybe not the cameras, or the photos, or the cabins, but you were part of the silence. You chose it, over and over. I could hear her breathing shift. Not defensive, not angry, just broken. I still have the binder, she said. If I give it to you, will you turn it in? You could turn it in yourself, I snapped. I know, she whispered, but I think you're the only one with the courage left to do what's right. The conversation ended soon after. I didn't say goodbye. The next morning, she dropped the binder off at my apartment door. No note, no knock, just a plain black folder with duct tape on the edges, as if it had been handled too many times. Inside were photos of a girl, maybe 9, maybe 10, same angles, same horror, same stolen innocence. I drove straight to Jacqueline's office and handed it over. No words, just evidence. Another child, another scar carved into a story that was already too long, too heavy. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever stop being angry. Not just at my father, not even at Mark, but at the people who stood by and said nothing. At my mother, who once brushed my hair with the same hands that later closed the door on my cries for help. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I would not be that kind of woman. I would not be the one who looked away. I would not be the silence that let monsters grow. Oh. The courtroom was cold, not from temperature, but from the weight of what had brought us all there. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Old wood and concrete steeped in decades of other people's tragedies, now absorbing ours. I sat in the second row, not too close to the front. I didn't want to be near my father, not even his shadow, but I needed to see his face. I needed to watch him hear the truth spoken out loud. The truth he'd buried under silence and secrecy. The truth I had spent years trying to convince myself I imagined. To his left sat Mark, my uncle, the man who had built the closet of horrors, the one who took pictures of sleeping children like they were collectibles, the man who stalked me long before I even knew what the word stalking meant. And now he was finally here. In a courtroom where he wasn't in control. No hidden rooms, no secret drives, no nephews to threaten or sons to silence. He looked smaller than I remembered, the kind of small that comes from shrinking inside guilt, too heavy to carry. But even now, I didn't see shame in his eyes, only calculation. The judge entered. The room stood. Then it began. The prosecution started with evidence. Folders, timestamps, metadata, photos recovered from the cabins, binders from the attic, testimony from officers who conducted the searches. Jacqueline presented everything methodically, like each fact was a brick, and by the end of the trial, she'd have built a prison around them that no amount of power or privilege could escape from. They called Detective Matthews to the stand. He detailed every recovery, every hidden drive, every map. His voice never shook, but the courtroom did, especially when he described the notes. The entries written in Mark's handwriting about what the children liked to eat, what scared them, how compliant they were after time. Each sentence made me grip the wooden bench until my knuckles turned white. Then came the part I dreaded. Testimony. Jake was the first family member to take the stand. He walked to the witness box slowly, as if carrying years of weight on his back. I watched his jaw tighten, his shoulders square. He raised his hand, took the oath, and then he spoke. I was 11 when I found the room. He said, I thought I was the first. I wasn't. His voice didn't crack, not once. He told the court how his father had manipulated him into silence, how the fear wasn't just of being hurt, but of not being believed, how he learned to pretend everything was fine, even while dying inside. I thought maybe I could protect the others if I stayed quiet, he said. I thought maybe if I just followed the rules, no one else would end up like me. He glanced at me, just once, eyes shining, but I was wrong. The courtroom was silent. No scribbling from journalists, no coughs. Just the sound of truth finally standing up. Jake stepped down, and then it was my turn. My knees shook as I walked to the stand. The bailiff asked if I'd swear to tell the truth. I've been trying to do that since I was 8, I said before raising my hand. The courtroom didn't react, but I felt the shift. The moment my voice became louder than their secrets, I told them everything. The hallway, the closet, the mildew, and the smell. I didn't recognize as a child, but would never forget as an adult. The black book with my name on it, my parents' reaction, the gaslighting, the dismissal, the silence. I told them about the fear, the therapy I never got, the dreams that never stopped. I told them how I found a second binder in my father's drawer when I was 24, how that broke whatever illusion of family I had left. And when I got to the part about my dad, about how he helped cover it up, how he let it happen, how he confessed only when the walls started closing in, I looked directly at him, his eyes filled with tears. I didn't stop. You didn't just fail me, I said. You betrayed me. You let your brother touch children so you wouldn't lose your image, your job, your reputation. You stood next to him while he stole pieces of children he could never give back. I felt the tears come, but I didn't wipe them. I am not here to forgive you. I am here so no one forgets what you are. When I stepped down, the courtroom exhaled, and then the defense stood up. Tired, men with tired arguments, that Mark had a mental illness, that my father was a victim first, that they didn't understand the gravity of what they were doing. Jacqueline didn't let it stand. When it came time for closing arguments, she stood in front of that courtroom and laid it bare. Mark didn't just commit crimes, she said. He curated them. He documented them, saved them, labeled them. That is not a man lost in mental illness. That is a man who planned. She turned to the jury, and as for the father, a man who allowed his own daughter to be photographed and stalked. He wasn't confused. He was complicit. Then came deliberation. Hours passed. Each tick of the clock was a small hammer in my chest. And then the jury returned, guilty. On every count, no plea deals, no mercy, no buried evidence. The judge set sentencing for 2 weeks later. But that day, as I walked out of the courthouse into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not peace, not joy, but certainty that the men who tried to destroy children in secret would now be remembered, publicly, for what they truly were, and that the rest of us, the ones who survived, would never be silent again. The courthouse smelled like old dust and coffee that had been sitting too long in forgotten cups. A place where justice was supposed to be clean, but the air still carried the rot of the crimes we were there to sentence. It was sentencing day, the end of a nightmare, or maybe just the end of the beginning. 2 weeks had passed since the verdict. 2 weeks of interviews, victim impact statements, media frenzy, and silence from the people who once called themselves my family. My phone hadn't buzzed once from my mother, not a single text, not a missed call. The woman who used to send emoji hearts for no reason now had nothing to say. I walked into court that morning dressed in black, not because I was mourning, but but because it felt like a uniform. A symbol of resistance, of survival, of bearing witness. Jake walked beside me, silent, solemn. We hadn't talked much since the verdict. There wasn't much to say. We were both just trying to breathe again. When we sat down, I saw my mother already there. Front row, pressed blouse. Clutching a worn leather purse, like it was an anchor in a storm. She didn't turn to look at me. She kept her eyes on the front, on the courtroom doors, like she was waiting for someone else to walk through. Someone else's life, not the wreckage of her own. The courtroom filled quickly. Victims' families, reporters, detectives, lawyers, strangers who had followed the case through headlines and hashtags and now came to see justice made real. Then they brought them in. First, Mark. He was shackled, thinner than before, but not broken. His eyes darted around the room, and for a second, he even smirked, like he still thought he had cards left to play, like the man who cataloged children like possessions might still find a loophole in the law. Then came my father. He didn't smirk. He didn't even lift his head. He looked like a man already buried, breathing in shame, drowning in consequence. The judge began with Mark. He read through the charges again, one by one. Assault, exploitation, murder, obstruction, over 24 charges, and every one of them stuck like nails to a coffin. Then the victims' families spoke. A mother who lost her son at age 10, a father who never found his daughter's body until the raid on the cabin, a teenage girl, now in her 20s, who said she still wakes up screaming when she sees someone with a beard like Mark's. And then, it was my turn. I stood up, walked to the podium. My statement had been written and rewritten a dozen times, but now, I didn't look down at the paper. I just looked at him. You tried to make me your secret, I said. You tried to fold me into your sickness, like I'd disappear. But here I am, grown, loud, alive. I paused. Let him see what he'd failed to destroy. And every time you hear your name now, it won't be praise. It won't be respect. It'll be a reminder that you were exposed by a child who refused to stay quiet. Then I turned to the judge. I ask for the maximum sentence, not just for me or the other victims, but for every child who never got to grow up and speak for themselves. The judge nodded, and when he passed the sentence, his voice didn't waver. Mark Connors, he said, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No emotion, no mercy. Mark didn't flinch, but for the first time, he didn't smile either. Then, it was my father's turn. The courtroom shifted. A different kind of tension. Less rage, more sorrow, more confusion. He had pleaded guilty, cooperated, led them to evidence that broke the case wide open. But he had also participated, enabled, photographed, protected evil with silence. The judge reviewed the cooperation, the value of his information, the scale of his betrayal. Then he asked if my father wanted to speak. My father stood slowly. I betrayed every vow a father is supposed to keep, he said, his voice thin. I failed to protect. I failed to speak. I became the thing I was once afraid of. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't try to explain it away. I accept whatever this court decides, and I will carry the weight of my choices until I take my last breath. The judge looked at him for a long time before speaking. Given the severity of your crimes and your cooperation, this court sentences you to 40 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 30. The room was silent. My father nodded. No tears, no anger, just the slow collapse of a man whose secrets had finally consumed him. As he was led out, our eyes met one final time. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just let him see me. Not his daughter, not his victim, but the woman who survived him. After the hearing, I stepped outside into the sun. The sky was painfully blue, the kind of sky that made you want to believe the world could be good again. Jake joined me. We stood in silence for a long time before he finally spoke. You did it, he said. No, I replied, we did. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We just stood there. 2 survivors, 2 cousins, 2 children who'd been turned into witnesses. And then into warriors. And for the first time in years, I felt light enough to breathe. The trial was over. The verdicts had been read. The monsters were in cages. But when the news vans disappeared and the courtroom emptied, When Jake went home to his own small apartment and the reporters stopped calling, what was left was me, just me, and the silence I'd lived in for most of my life. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I had a day with no appointments, no depositions, no meetings with the prosecutor or detectives. I sat on my bed, holding the last envelope my therapist had asked me to open only when the trial was finished. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one question. What do you want your life to look like now? I stared at that sentence like it had teeth because I didn't know how to answer it. Not really, for so long. My life had been about survival. Protecting secrets, breaking them open, enduring what came after. But building something from scratch, that was terrifying. So, I did what I used to do as a child when I didn't know what to say. I walked through the park where I used to play, past the swings I avoided now, past the elementary school where the last victim had been approached. And then, almost against my better judgment, I walked past my mother's apartment. I hadn't seen her since the final day of trial. She hadn't reached out. I hadn't either. But when I saw her sitting on the steps, hunched over in a cardigan that didn't match her shoes, something about it looked smaller, human, broken. She looked up and saw me. Her eyes widened, but she didn't stand. I didn't think I'd see you again, she said quietly. I sat down on the opposite end of the step. Not close, not far. I'm not here to fix anything, I said. I didn't expect you to, she replied. I don't deserve that. We sat in silence for a long time, just the sound of a dog barking 2 blocks over and a wind chime clinking somewhere above us. Finally, she spoke. When you were little, you used to line your stuffed animals up in a row before you could sleep. You said they made you feel safe. Do you remember that? I did. I remembered it clearly. How I used to whisper goodnight to each one. How I used to hope that if something terrible happened again, at least they'd be watching. You never asked why I did that, I said. She nodded. I didn't want to know. That's the problem, I said. You never wanted to know. Not when I told you about the room, not when I was scared every night, not even when you saw how I changed. She didn't argue. I'm sorry, she whispered. I believed her, but it didn't change anything. I know now, she continued, her voice cracking, that saying sorry doesn't fix anything, That being afraid doesn't excuse silence, that protecting a name isn't worth a child's life. I looked at her then, really looked. The woman who had once brushed my hair before school, the woman who had turned away when I needed her most, the woman who, like my father, had chosen comfort over truth. Until there was no comfort left to hide behind. Do you want forgiveness? I asked her bluntly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I want peace for both of us, but if that means you never speak to me again, I'll understand. I nodded slowly, and then I stood up. Maybe one day, I said, but not today. I turned and walked away. Not angry, not bitter, just done. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and took out that sheet of paper, the one that had asked me what I wanted my life to look like. And this time, I wrote something, honest, free, quiet, but never silent again. Then, I opened a new document on my laptop. The title bar blinked back at me. Things I never said, I started typing, not for court records, not for evidence, but for me, for every girl who was told to stay quiet, for every survivor who was called a liar, for every child who walked away from the worst day of their life and kept walking, and for every person who needed to know that the truth, no matter how devastating, is the first brick in the road to healing. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if my nightmares will ever fully stop, but I know this: I am not what they did to me. I am what I chose to do with it, and I choose to speak. Even if my voice shakes, even if my family falls apart, even if the whole world looks away, because silence protected monsters. But my truth, it sets me free.